What is up, guys? It is the OTO podcast back with another episode. We are at episode 6 with my co host from Next Man Up MMA. You can check out his channel in the link down below and he can introduce himself now.
How's it going, guys? Back with another episode this week after a blockbuster card that we've been hyping up for a few months now. The card definitely met the expectations that we had for it. So starting off, we'll talk about the main event between Sean Strickland and Dricus du Plessis, their rematch for the belt. And now DDP has officially solidified himself as the better fighter, now beating him twice. Whatever you had the first one scored, this one was very different than that one. Absolute domination on this, depending on the judges. And I know a lot of people had their grades out there, but you could argue 50-45 across the board. Maybe I think at most you could give Sean one round. I know I'm pretty sure you said you had it 49-46, but either way, just absolute domination from DDP here as he continues to defend his belt, getting his second official title defense out.
Yeah, it was, I was going to say an interesting fight, but it just really wasn't. But DDP is a very interesting fighter. Sean is not. He somehow fooled people into thinking he was based off his outside the octagon antics. But I had it myself. You see what I did there? But I had
Yeah.
it myself at 49, 46. I give Sean, I think it was around two or three. He started landing a few power shots. He was out landing, but DDP had to take down that round. He also landed, so I don't see a problem with giving all 5 rounds to DDP. But I think it's officially over. I'm done with Sean in the title talks, to be honest. This was his chance. He had the belt. He got a chance to fight for his belt back. Watching the first fight back, I think Dricus also won that fight. So overall, 2 fights, total of 10 rounds. Dricus showed he's by far the better champ and the deserving champ. But his style is so interesting to me that I'll be honest, that was the first fight where I've picked Dricus to win. I had Whitaker against him, I had Izzy against him, and I had Strickland the first time against him. I just didn't love that goofy style, the way he throws and lunges those hooks. It looks like any good striker, like Whitaker or Izzy, would counter him perfectly, but somehow, again and again, he happens to win. And one thing I noticed is how big Dricus is as a middleweight. He's absolutely massive. I think he's very disciplined, especially with his weight cut. Um, and then Strickland, who knows if he had staff, if he was fighting health issues. There was a lot of different remarks and reports over the week, but I was so confused with Strickland. I was pretty annoyed the entire fight why he's doing the exact same game plan. In his corner, his coach told him every single round, step it up, step it up. We're doing the same thing. And it seemed to me like Strickland in his head was saying, I'm going to do the exact same thing I just did that lost me a fight against the exact same guy. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. I was infuriated the entire fight about Strickland's lack of a complete game plan at all.
Yeah. Well, if you guys know, I've been defending DDP on here pretty much every episode. You know, one of my favorite fighters since the beginning. He's been the only guy that hasn't let me down so far. Through these past few fights, finishing Izzy, beating Sean twice now, finishing Whitaker. So he's gone through that gauntlet. I do think that he's probably the most underrated fighter in the UFC right now. Like I've said before, he's become a more hated guy, but it's mostly just because he goes up against fan favorites every single fight. A lot of people really like Sean Strickland. I am, like you said, I'm completely done with him now. He proved in that fight that he really should not be in that title picture anymore. He's just not an entertaining fighter in really any sense. Just goes out there, spars the whole time, and that's been the joke for a little while. But especially in that fight, he just didn't really do much. He didn't move forward at all. He was kind of just there. He kind of just took up space, honestly. I mean, people have been vying for Kamzat to get that shot, even maybe Imavov after he just finished Izzy before. And I think either one of those guys would have given us a better title fight. And going forward, DDP should have some entertaining fights against whoever is next. Obviously, I think it is Kamzat, but who knows? Realistically, because Dana White has said that it's going to be Khamzat, but we never really know until it actually happens. He's had some history of not having great health too as well, so who knows? But either way, if he does fight him next, it is going to be interesting to look at. I know that DDP is going to be the underdog in that fight due to that wrestling, but I think it'll be an entertaining fight overall. This one wasn't that entertaining, so hopefully his next title defense is a lot better than this one. Not from his point, obviously he went out there and did his thing, but in the fight itself, a little more entertaining for us, the fans.
Yeah, Dricus has gained a lot of respect from me, and I think a lot of other people in the MMA world, from like fans and even people doing their rankings alike for pound stuff. But he's secretly kind of gone up there. I have him now above Aspinall, which I would not have thought that would have been possible. But Dricus is active. Everything you want in a champ. He goes for finishes. He's undefeated. And something I like a lot is he wants the best fights. He knew that the first fight was kind of a not a great fight, no fault to his own. And he came out here looking for a finish. Sean made that really hard to happen. He's a defensive minded fighter with almost no offense at all. But Dricus goes out there. He choked out Izzy, which was no one's ever done that really. He knocks out guys that have never been knocked out before. So I am really liking Dricus as a champ. And when you look at the middleweight division now, I'm kind of done with Sean because when you go for so many split decisions, this is exactly what happens. You win one, you lose one. The judges aren't that good. Who knows? It's a robbery. It's a bad call. That's going to keep happening to Sean. If he might win next fight, he might lose next fight, and then the cycle is going to repeat. And if it's like roulette, if it lands on black twice in a row, Sean gets a title fight again. I don't want to see that. And when you look at the division, you have Kamaev should be next, definitely. But something I like that Dricus said is he's saying Imavov or Barajo. He said they can fight, and then I'll take the winner of that afterward. He's already setting up the best fights in the division, and there is great fights. So these guys like Izzy, Whitaker, Sean, I think are out of the title picture now. But you do have these still exciting guys like Barajo, Kamaev, or Imavov. So I hope Dricus fights pretty soon. He usually fights roughly twice a year, which is about normal for a champ, but I would like to see him back, hopefully late summer-ish, somewhere around there against Kamaev, and that would be a very, very fun fight.
Yeah, I mean, next for Sean, like I said before, I think if he loses, maybe that fight against Izzy, maybe they get their rematch. That would one that could easily be booked and people would be excited about because obviously they both have their fan bases. Both of them, who knows what happens after another loss for each of them. But I don't know. I think Sean's out of the title picture for a little while. When we look at the rankings, especially too, there's two guys next for Dricus to fight. And then even after that, if he wants to fight Alex and make that fight that both of them want, I mean, Dricus has three fights going for him, and Sean, I mean, it just depends on where you want to put him after these rankings. Like, the thing is, he's good, but like I said before, that victory over Paulo Costa, we know how good Paulo Costa is right now, which is not very, and going out there and just jabbing him for 25 minutes and just not really doing much before. To get that title opportunity just didn't really sit right with me. I guess he deserved it. They told him he could have it, but I think he's probably going to fall out soon. I don't think he's going to be getting another title shot anytime soon unless he somehow shocks the world again and goes out and beats one of those top guys. But there's a lot of younger guys too as well coming up. I mean, Bo Nichols ranked now. Even a guy like Kyle Berhalio, I'd like to see him go in there and get some big fights soon as well. So we'll see. There's a lot of good prospects in the middleweight division, as we know. So that'll be interesting to look at going forward as well. A very good division overall, which we've talked about a lot pretty much every week. But next up, the other title fight on this card, Zhang Weili defended her belt against Tatiana Suarez. I mean, we both were talking about this before, very big fans of Zhang Weili. She was actually an underdog on some books. At most, she was even or a slight favorite, but there was nowhere that you could find her at lower odds than minus like 120. Like it was pretty even if she wasn't the underdog. I know both of us were very surprised by that. I think Zhang is like undoubtedly the best women's fighter in the world right now. She went out there and she got it done against an undefeated fighter that a lot of people thought were going to win this. That first round, many people who bet on Tatiana probably thought that she's going to win this fight. She looked really good, but then things quickly shifted and Zhang just out dominated her in the next 4 rounds and kept her belt.
Yeah, a classic matchup of a great wrestler versus a great all-around fighter and striker in Zhang Weili. But yeah, as you said, I was shocked she was the underdog. She's dominated her last opponents. Lemos at 292 when she first defended it. Zhao Nan at 300. She has absolutely dominated her opponents recently. She's on a great run. Suarez was undefeated, but she's fought like 3 times now in the last 6 years about. I know she's had very unlucky health injuries and issues, but I'm not sure at all why she was favored. Maybe that wrestling people thought would take her over Wei Li, but Wei Li looks to be so well rounded. And in my mind, she's a level above anyone else. Shevchenko is the UFC's pound for pound #1 women's fighter, but in my mind, it's not really close. Shevchenko and Grasso have had a great little rivalry, but both have beaten each other and made each other look bad. Wei Li hasn't been beaten since Nama Yunus years ago, and she's looked unbeatable since then. I think she's head and shoulders above the competition. So I would I kind of predicted a pretty easy win for her. Obviously, it went to decision, which is pretty normal for women's fights in the UFC, but still, nothing against her for going there because she did a ton of damage and looked great. She cut open Suarez bad, but in the division, I'm not even sure what you do with Wei Li. She is a little bit inactive. She fights around once a year. I'd like to see her fight a little more often, even if she upsets to twice a year. She can fight. I think she's 35, 36 now. She can fight 2 or 3 more times, 2 more years, and then she can retire as possibly one of the best women's fighters ever. I think we're getting close to that conversation with people like Nunez or Pena, where they have their own little GOAT conversations, but I think very highly of Weili.
Yeah, honestly, in my opinion, the next fight for her, just have her fight Shevchenko. I think if we're gonna have a really good fight, if we're gonna have two champions fight against each other, just make this fight. It was brought up a little bit after this. Alexa Grasso and Shevchenko. I mean, Grasso is the #1 contender. We're not gonna see that fight again. So I think Weili should go out there, challenge Shevchenko as well. And honestly, if we're going to see two champions fight, this would probably be one of the highest level fights that we could get right now in the UFC. And finally give Shevchenko a different fight. I mean, as we know, the last 3 fights, she's fought the same opponent. So it would probably be nice to give her another fight. And as we know as well, she always fights on the same card as John Jones most of the time, which has been pointed out by Chael Sonnen. He said a few other things about the coincidences between them, but maybe we get two champion versus champion fights in the future if we're going to make this big card. If we're going to have John Jones versus Aspinall and then Zhang Weili versus Valentina Shevchenko, if we're going to continue that interesting bond between Shevchenko and John Jones, which some people have pointed out before, maybe that's the time to make it. But I mean, like we both said, Zhang Weili, I think, is unarguably the best women's fighter in the world right now, especially within the UFC. There's not really anyone else I think that you can look at. And like you said, I mean, the last time she fought, the last time she lost against Rose, that was a while ago, and she has completely redefined her game since then.
Yeah, and going through the rest of the card, where after Wei Li, after Dricus, 2 title fights, 2 champions, we didn't see a single ranked fighter on the entire card. And we mentioned this last episode, but we were both kind of shocked to see that. I was maybe being delusional, but I thought we were going to see them throw on someone within the last few weeks of the fight. Some Aussie fighter, maybe even Volk, something crazy if he fights Pitbull or whoever it could be. But we didn't see anybody added. I'm still so confused about why they rolled out this card. 313, great fights going on. 314, great fights going on. And then right in the middle of it, you have just a terrible card. And we mentioned it, the last terrible card in my mind was 297 Strickland DDP. So I'm not sure if they have something against them, but DDP is quickly moving up at least my list of like most exciting and active champions. I think he's one of the biggest draws as a worldwide champion right now. With the South Africans that like him, in Australia they seem to like him, and now people in America like him probably more than Sean Strickland. So he's moving up, getting more defenses. I was shocked they didn't help him with a better card, but we can go through it. But one fight that I liked a lot was Talis and Teixeira, and I'd like to go into that fight because Justin Tafa did not look good at all. It was kind of the same thing we've seen with Tai Tuivasa or his brother Junior Tafa. There's like an epidemic of these guys where after guys like Mark Hunt, there was a huge stage of heavyweights from Australia, New Zealand, the Polynesians, and they seemed to not look good at all. Tai Tuivasa looked to be 400, 500 pounds at UFC 312. Tafa looked absolutely terrible. They gassed out instantly. Heavyweight's already in a terrible spot, and these Australian, New Zealand heavyweights are really struggling, where Teixeira looked incredible with a really fast knockout in the first round.
Yeah, I mean, you just talked about the fight longer than it lasted. I know we both had Teixeira in this fight, went out there, got it done, which is good. I don't think Justin Tafa, going into this fight, I did not think he was really that great. And he got fraud checked pretty easily in this one. Teixeira too, as well. I mean, 25 years old, 6'7". Um, this guy's a very big draw going forward for the UFC, especially at 6'7". Clip farming the 6'7" right now. So I mean, it's just good for the UFC. Like we've talked about, the heavyweights not really too amazing right now. So it's good to see a guy like that move up. Justin Tafa, I mean, he's lost his past two fights. Realistically, when we look at looking at his wins, nothing that I was impressed with overall. I mean, he's been in the UFC for a long time now. And when you look at some of these names that he's beat, like they're not guys that I'm too impressed with. Um, I don't know. I didn't really think that Tafa was that great. He got completely exposed, so I guess that was good to see. And the UFC gets another heavyweight guy to finally kind of bring up as well. Another fight on here, the one before that, which actually ended in a draw. Jimmy Crute came out. It looked like he was 5, 6 seconds away from getting a knockout win in the first round. But then Bellato came back, won those last two rounds, and made it a draw. So that was a good fight to see, I guess. I mean, it wasn't the best fight I've ever seen, but it was definitely entertaining. It was cool to see Bellato come back and get that to be a draw, especially after that first round. It looked like it was just going to be domination. So, out of all the fights on this card, that was probably one of the more entertaining ones, especially since we saw a lot of decisions on this card. It seemed like almost every single fight ended in a decision. So, that was a cool one to see. Jake Matthews won as well. In pretty dominating fashion, I would say. He was a bigger favorite on this card, went out and won. And overall, this card wasn't the best, but the main card itself, I would say that it may be the worst on paper, but I guess I'm not mad that I watched it in the end. I think it was better than I thought it was going to be, since we at least saw one fight that was pretty cool to watch between Crute and Bellato. And Teixeira went out there and got a quick knockout as well. And Dricus versus Sean wasn't as entertaining as we would have hoped, but it was cool, I guess, to see Dricus just go out there and to have one of those dominating performances as well. Zhang Weili had a dominating performance. So overall, this card, for what it was, it didn't live below the expectations that I had. It met them, maybe exceeded them a little bit. So it didn't disappoint me because I've had very low expectations, but at least it wasn't the worst card that we've probably ever seen in history.
Yeah, it was definitely a card. And going into fight week, a lot of fights got taken off the card. So I think there was only 11 out of the 14 and 13 originally booked. But one thing I would like to say, going from the heavyweights and Tafa, someone who we've been dogging on, Tai Tuivasa, is now a top 10 ranked heavyweight. He moved up in the rankings after 5 straight losses. That is absurd. He should be cut because I only bring it up because last week they cut Yarino Rosenstrike, who he had like 1 or 2 losses in a row. He gets cut
Hmm.
now, ties top 10 after 5 losses. I really don't understand. In my mind, cut Ty right now, put Taliesin Teixeira right where Ty is. I don't think anything would be missing, but heavyweight's in a terrible spot. And guys like Justin Taffa and Junior Taffa somehow get these opportunities where they keep pulling out of fights, replacing each other in the fights. That was cool, but it seems like there's no effort from them at all. Mark Hunt has done so much goodwill for these fat heavyweights to pretend they're good. Tai Tuivasa should be cut immediately. Rosenstrike, I'm not sure why he was the one that got cut, but the heavyweight division makes me very sad to look at. But before we move on, I'll go down the card to prelims. I'll name 2 fights I liked, and then if you had any that you enjoyed. But one for me, I think was of note was the Topuria fight. I was really interested watching that fight to see what would happen. And to be honest, he looked great. He's very short. I didn't know he was a bantamweight, to be honest. I thought he was a featherweight like his brother. Um, he looks incredible. The way they're training him and his brother, they're definitely doing the right things. They're doing everything well. They're well disciplined. He looked great. He was very calm. His boxing was great. His wrestling was great. He definitely won the rivalry over Volk's team, but Thickness looked to be a little frantic in there. He was kind of bouncing around like he was scared of Topuria. Topuria looked calm as can be, got a very easy win. Great kicks, great boxing. I'm excited for Topuria at bantamweight. I think he can be very, very good. And then the only other fight I had a ton of fun watching, I think the best fight of the card that got fight of the night was Cody Steele versus Rong Ju. Cody Steele was one of my favorite prospects coming out of the Contender Series. He's an incredible grappler with a ton of fun striking. For some reason, he decided not to grapple at all. He was the heavy favorite, and he lost against a guy who's 1-3 in the UFC. But it was a banger fight. It was bloody. Steele was swinging with no defense. So that it was good to see some great fights down the card. Anshul Jubilee is absolutely pathetic. He got KO'd to start off the card instantly within one punch, 5 seconds in. After his first fight where he got barked at like a dog and gave up, and now this where he gets KO'd instantly. I think India needs a better fighter. They need to pick someone else. Jubilee is pathetic. But if you have anything on the prelims, now's your time.
Yeah. I mean, if we're trying to bring in an Indian fighter, if we have kind of that connection right now, maybe we bring in a guy like Jinder Mahal. He was Indian. I guess he still is Indian. But I guess he would be a good guy to bring in. There's nothing really else that I need to talk about this card. One thing that I do want to bring up is that I had a very bad end to the year last year in the final pay-per-view in my predictions. I said I was going to come back better this year. So far with that draw on this card, I'm 8-1-1, and the only fight that I've gotten wrong on the main card this year has been unfortunately Kevin Holland. But since then, I'm perfect. So hopefully can keep that going on the next card. This one, I would say I feel pretty proud about too as well because Wei Lee was a bit of an underdog depending on where you looked as well. So especially Teixeira too. He was a slight favorite in some places. That Bellato fight kind of saved everything too with that being a draw because I thought he was completely done as well. But overall, definitely a card of all time, like we said. Going into next week, though, or I guess this week as of this recording, is we have Jared Cannonier versus Rodriguez, and we actually have a few fight nights before our next actual event that we can talk about. But this one in particular, we can just go through a few of them since we have 3 fight nights before the next main card, so it will be a little while until we have our next episode. But if we want to just highlight a few fights from each and then move on to the next one, this one obviously Cannonier versus Gregory Rodriguez. Rodriguez a pretty heavy favorite, which is interesting to look at. Cannonier 7, so Rodriguez would definitely be able to move up into the rankings as he's unranked right now. So very interesting in my opinion to see that he's a -200 favorite. I don't know if I'm missing something here, but I know obviously Jared Cannonier has been on a little bit of a downfall. And then we also have number 10 Calvin Kattar as well versus Youssef Zalal from Morocco. He's a very heavy favorite, which means he could break into the top 10. So we have two guys potentially breaking into the top 10 of some pretty high up divisions with the middleweight and the featherweight divisions right here.
Yeah, on the card, it's an all right fight night for sure. There's both of the Bonfim brothers are on there. If you go right at the bottom, just to pick on and dog on heavyweight division even more, there's Dontel Mays versus Voltaire Walker, Johnny Walker's brother, who absolutely sucks. Dontel Mays also sucks, but is now a ranked heavyweight, so that's good for him. But going to the top, Yusuf Zalal is going through a crazy career revival. It's been fun to watch. He looked incredible against Jack Shore. He's been on a fantastic run. Calvin Cutter's been kind of slowing down a little bit, but Zalal can move into the rankings even higher, which would be huge for him. And then the Killer Gorilla, Jared Cannonier. I'm a huge fan of fun fighter, but he is 40. Gregory Rodriguez has a ton of power. I think that's going to be a great fight. Kind of similar to Cannonier's last few fights, where he took a ton of damage against Baralho and Imavov. Two guys that both climbed to the top of the division. It's not really Cannonier's fault. He got dealt those two amazing fighters, but they both dealt a ton of damage to the 40-year-old. So I guess that's probably the best fight of the card. And then looking past that, we have UFC Seattle. Very sad for me, at least, that Dom Cruz got taken off the card and retired with an injury. I was
Hmm.
personally looking forward to that fight a lot. But when you look, I think this card is one of the best fight nights coming up. Some guys like Barbosa or Steve Garcia. Both are very dangerous strikers. I'm a huge fan of both of them. We have Gene Silva fighting on the card, and then Alan Hernandez. Anthony Hernandez, I think, is one of the most underrated UFC fighters. He's very, very good. And then Song Yudong, I hope he absolutely puts Cejudo's lights out. But a ton of fun fights on that card if you have any that you want to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, this card is very good as well. Probably one of the best fight nights in a while, in my opinion. We get a top five women's bantamweight fight as one of the early fights. I know you probably were just waiting for me to mention that one as well. Um,
Yes.
Adam Fuggett versus Billy Ray Goff, a great fight right there.
Plug it.
Edson Barboza as well fighting again. Curtis Blades gets an unranked heavyweight from Russia. I don't like every time we look at the heavyweight division, there's just something going on. So it'll be interesting. Rizvan, I can't pronounce his last name. But he's making his debut, a Dana White Contender Series guy. He's 2-0 at this point, a very massive person overall. So if he goes out there and somehow beats Curtis Blades, who knows what's going to happen in the division? It's just going to be even more insane than what it already is. Gene Silva gets a pretty easy fight. I think he's going to go out there and get it done, get a knockout, but great to see him fighting again. Brendan Allen versus Anthony Hernandez. Both of these guys, I think, can put on a good fight as well. So that'll be a fun fight to watch. And then, like you said, I hope Song Yadong officially this time retires Henry Cejudo, and Henry Cejudo will be out of the UFC. An all-time great, two-time champion. But at some point you do have to hang it up, and I do think it's his time to hang it up as well. And then our final fight night before our next pay-per-view is headlined by Manel Kape. He's going to be taking on Asu from Kazakhstan. Both of these guys, great fighters within the flyweight division. Arguably could be a contender fight at this point. Pantoja's been getting contenders. He's been running through them recently. Manel Kape is that guy. He's the next guy who is projected to become the next number one contender at this point. So if he goes out and wins that, he'll probably end up getting a championship fight next. Cody Brundage on here as well. This one, not the greatest one overall. There are some guys maybe farther down that we can look at. Danny Barlow, a guy who I've been interested in before as well too. I don't know if there's anyone else you want to talk about. Maybe William Gomez. A few decent guys on this, but not the best overall. We do get a unranked heavyweight fight to talk about the heavyweights as well on the main card with Austin Lane versus Mario Pinto. Austin Lane, a guy who Justin Taffa beat. So that shows you how good that this guy is.
Yeah, I mean Gomez versus Hyder Emil should be a fun fight with good strikers. Haxparat and Ribovic. Ribovic coming off that fight of the night performance, possibly fight of the year performance. And I
Mhm.
was pretty bummed to see Royval coming off hurt because the flyweight division is in a weird spot. I've been kind of seeing rumblings of maybe Pantoja being added on to 314. He will be fighting somewhat soon, it seems like, because it has been a few months now. But all right, it's 2 months now, but it does seem like they are just throwing contenders at him. Where even like Manel Kape, I am a fan of, but I think it was just 2 fights ago now where Muhammad Makayev pulled his pants down and embarrassed him, and
Mhm.
now he had a fantastic performance after that. But I think the flyweights, like someone who's on this card, is a Charles Johnson, a very talented fighter who's been slept on a lot. I think at the bottom of the rankings, not getting these big fights. Almabayev is a great fighter, so that I'm happy they could find him when Royval dropped out. But when you look at the division, Pantoja, the next guy, it could be Kai Kara France at 314. Tatsuro Taira might be one of the number one contenders now. We do like a lot of these flyweights. I know we both like Tyra. I'm a big fan of the flyweight division, but it seems like the matchmaking is kind of interesting. They're having a tough time really breaking out the levels, the 2 tiers of real contenders, and then guys filling out the rankings. So I'm happy they're getting these fights booked, but I would like to see guys like Kaya Sakura, like Joshua Van is being booked soon, I think, but really separate the real contenders from just the guys in the rankings. Because it seems like they're kind of stuck right now. Like Manel Kopp had one exciting fight, and now he's like the number one contender, it seems like. So even though he's like the eighth ranked guy, so it seems like they're kind of stuck right now, but they have a ton of young flyweights to pick from. And overall, a good card though. But I was bummed about Royval missing out. I think that would have been a great fight because Royval has been like the most gatekeeper flyweight there is. He seems to be always be the number one contender, but he can just never really win the belt.
Yeah, like that the Sean Strickland role, which we've seen as well.
Yeah.
I think Manel Kopp is a little overrated. I've said this before. It will be interesting to see what happens going into this fight. I think Royval would have beat him and then would have stayed in that number one contender spot, which he's at right now. So it'll be interesting to see that one as well. One guy that you just mentioned who will be on UFC 313 officially is Joshua Van, a guy that you've been very heavy on. He's fighting Bruno Silva. One of these guys could get pretty close to the top 10 with this win. We don't have the official main card right now since we're a little far out, but we do have some good fights. I mean, if we do have these top 5 fights as the main card, but I do think they will add another one as well. But starting from the bottom, we have Amanda Lemos is going to be fighting here as well, a top 7 fight in the women's strawweight division. Bruno Silva versus Joshua Van, which I just mentioned. Rufy is going to be coming back. He's going to be fighting your boy King Green. I know you like to call him that. So that could be a big win for him as King Green, as you like to call him, has been within those rankings recently. So definitely a big fight for Rufy there, a guy who was a little behind his gym teammates, but could easily catch up to a lot of them with this fight. And then the main event and the co-main event, which are official, Dan Hooker versus Justin Gaethje, Alex Pereira versus Magomed Ankalaev, 2 insane fights. I don't know which one you want to start with, but both of these should be absolute bangers.
Yeah, so before I get to the top, going through the card, I think there's a chance they add another fight, but when I look at it now, I could easily see Rufy versus the King, Bobby Green, added to the main card. I could definitely see that. Armin Petrosyan could even fill out the bottom of the main card, but I think Lemos, Lucindo, Gaethje, Hooker, Pereira, Ankalaev could easily be 3 of those fights. So who knows if we'll get another fight added, but right now it's not bad at all. And I'll start off with Gaethje versus Hooker. As Money Moicano said, Hooker's a turtle in a tree. He's on a little win streak against okay competition. He had that iffy decision with Gamrot, who really knows who won that fight. But the fights before that were not great opponents. I think Gaethje is a level above Hooker, to be honest. Hooker's a really fun guy. People want him. This might be the people's BMF belt, this fight right here. Gaethje's taken a year off since that UFC 300 KO that everyone remembers. But Gaethje's still very, very good. I feel like people are forgetting that because of that KO, how good he is. he deserved to take a year off. I'm very glad he did. He should not have come back any sooner than that. But now he is back. Now he's healthy, rested. I think we're going to see a very good Gaethje here. Possibly one of his best performances. This will probably be the fight of the night, unless Pereira, gets the classic left hand to slump Ankalaev. But I think Gaethje is probably going to knock out Hooker within 2 or 3. Hooker has one of the best chins in the UFC, and I think Gaethje can be the one to crack that. But going to the main card, Pereira versus Ankalaev. This is definitely, people have split opinions. I'm pretty sure the odds are still roughly split right now, 50-50.
Hmm.
There's not really a big underdog. Obviously, I predict Pereira to slide more to the favorite as the fight goes on, with more people just know about him, more casuals will bet on him against Ankalaev. But Ankalaev is being seen as like this big challenge. Pereira wrestled Blachowicz. It was a close fight, possibly his toughest to get at light heavyweight. Um, and some people even thought he lost that fight. But Ankalaev is a good wrestler, but I feel like people, just because of his name, his beard, maybe, he's not really all of that. Just straight up wrestling. He loves to strike. He loves it, and I think he has the ego to take on someone like Pereira. Obviously, it's going to be smarter to wrestle, but I can see Ankalaev going out striking with Pereira, thinking he can do it, and he can't. But I would like to say, before I ask you your opinion, I think Pereira, we're going to see very much improved grappling and wrestling from Pereira. He's still, I don't know, 3 years into the MMA world now, into the UFC. Against Blachowicz, it did not look good for sure, but he's been working on it a lot. He's had the time to. I think Pereira's going to welcome the takedown. I think he's going to feel comfortable on the ground. Ankalaev won't be able to do too much on the ground. And then on the feet, Ankalaev will be comfortable enough to strike with Pereira, which will be a mistake. So I think this fight on paper is one of Pereira's toughest, if not the toughest, since the first Izzy fight, maybe. But I think Pereira has improved grappling and still has that KO power to get another huge KO here over Ankalaev.
Yeah, starting off first with Gaethje and Hooker, I think this is going to be a banger. Gaethje taking a while off, like you said, well deserved. I think I am going to take Gaethje as of right now in this. I know Hooker has that VC. He went out there and bought all the tattoos. He got his aura up, as the kids say these days. He's gone out there, but like you said, I think Gaethje is very good. I think some people are forgetting about that. And if Gaethje wants to avenge his loss against Habib, go up against Islam, this is his chance to do it, to go out there and become that number one contender again, go try to defeat the Russians. Again, this is his chance to go out there and do it. If he loses, it is more interesting though. He's not the youngest guy, but in this lightweight division, it seems like he could get a fight even if he loses. I do think he's going to win as of right now. For Pereira and Ankalaev, I have the same kind of ideas as you about this. I think I'm going to take Pereira. The thing about this one, the difference between this one and the Jan fight, like we said before, that one was very close. He wrestled against Jan, got a little bit of a shocking decision for some people. This is a 5-round fight. Every single round starts on the feet. It's very hard for Magomed to wrestle Alex Pereira for 25 straight minutes. That's just not going to happen realistically. And Pereira is not going to be the worst wrestler, worst grappler of all time. He's going to be able to get out of there. He's not going to be dominated on the ground the whole time. Ankalaev is not Marab. He's not going to go out there and just sit on him if he wants to for 25 minutes. He is a very good wrestler and grappler, but he's not that level, like you said. He's going to want to strike. He already said before he wants to strike as well. So I think Pereira will eventually catch him, maybe closer to like the 4th round. I do think that Magomed will go out there, try to win some rounds. I wouldn't be surprised if this is a point fight instead of just that traditional Pereira 1st or 2nd round knockout. But I am taking Pereira here. I do think he's going to win. And I see a lot of value. I'm not sure what the over is yet. Obviously, we're pretty far out, but I would take the over on 2.5 rounds, maybe even 3.5 at this point. I do think it is going to go a little while. And I wouldn't be surprised if it goes to decision because I think Pereira is going to be pretty weary. He's going to grapple if he has to. I wouldn't be surprised if he uses that size that he has and maybe tries to hold him up against the wall for a little bit or something like that. I do think this is going to be a little bit more of a drawn out fight. But with that being said, as we know, Pereira could end this with one shot if he wants to. But I do think this is going to be a little more drawn out than the traditional Pereira fight. And if we see what we saw in that Roundtree fight, if he starts getting dominated early, he knows how to come back. He knows how to enter that flow state. I think he's going to be a little more picky with his shots this time because realistically, he can't go out there and strike the whole time because Ankalaev, if Pereira leaves himself open, being more technical about this, Pereira is not going to go out there just swinging because there's a threat of him getting taken down. So I do think this one's going to go a little bit longer, but I do think Pereira is going to win.
Yeah, and I think the whole Dagestani thing is really throwing people off. There's no doubt they have great grapplers like Khabib, Islam, all these submission artists they have. That's not Ankalaev. He got choked out by Paul Craig in one of his first UFC fights. He doesn't have UFC submission to his name. I would be shocked. I don't want to bite my tongue here, but I just don't think there's a chance he's going to go for a submission. But as you said, yeah, maybe he wins a round or two by sitting on Pereira just like Jan did. However, also as you said, 25 minutes. Pereira has 25 minutes to land one hook. We saw it against Roundtree where he leaves those hands low and his hooks are always kind of uppercut. They go up just like perfect for someone lunging for a takedown. I think Ankalaev is it's going to be reminiscent of Yuri versus Alex 1, where Yuri's kind of bad form, low hands, kind of lunges in a little too aggressive, and Alex's boom lands that left hook right on the chin. So I think the kind of the betting side of this fight is really being thrown off by the Ankalaev name, the beard, the place where he's from. I think Alex should be a bigger favorite here. I think he deserves it. This is going to be another title defense that Alex has built up all this hype for. And we've said it before, maybe if he stays this active, who knows if he fights 4 times this year, Kevin Holland style. But uh but
Hopefully not
Pereira,
Kevin Holland style.
yeah, I hope he wins, not Kevin Holland style. But Pereira says Holland is his biggest influence in staying that active. He says it all the time in
Hmm.
Portuguese. You just have to translate it. But
Shama.
Ankalaev is, yeah, Shama. Ankalaev is not the guy that people think he is. He's very good. He's like 20-1, I believe. He only has one loss to Paul Craig, so he's on a great win streak. But there was a time like 2 years ago, he was kind of struggling with like Johnny Walker, not the same type of guys. Like now that I'm brainstorming here, but not like Pereira. So I think Pereira's going to shock people, which he does every fight. It seems like people forget just how good he is. So I like your over bet. I think he could mess with his food a little bit. It happened with Roundtree. Pereira's going to take his time, feel him out, and I think he's going to land that left hook that he always does.
Yeah, Pereira, everyone says, most dominant person in the UFC, outside of Islam, obviously, but gets a knockout every single time, dominates his opponents. Every single fight, besides that Roundtree fight, every Yuri fight, he's never been more than minus 200. He's been around that minus 100 area. His knockout is always plus money because he's around that area. Right now, it's even money at minus 110. Like if you bet on Pereira, you're making money almost every single time. So this guy, I think that's why so many people like him is because everyone thinks it seems like these lines are always close, but no one thinks he's going to lose, which is a weird thing to think about. A lot of people, this is the first time that I think people have really gone out there and said, okay, he's fighting a real test. I think Yuri is very good. I've said this before. I think if Pereira wasn't in the UFC, if he wasn't at light heavyweight, I think Yuri would be seeing that same kind of reign as DDP right now. They both go out there and they have that weird style, but they always find a way to get it done. And people forget how good Yuri is. You take away Pereira out of the UFC, and he's almost flawless on his record at that point. But I do think Pereira is definitely underrated in the odd sides. And I do, like you said, think it will change. A lot of money will be poured into him by the time the fight comes around. But we do have a little while until then, just under a month exactly until that next fight. So it will be a little while till we see you guys again on the channel. But after this card that we just saw, at least we get 3 decent fight nights going forward and then another good pay-per-view.
Yeah, and one last thing, not to interrupt, but correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like when Pereira fought Jamal Hill at 300, Jamal Hill was a surprisingly heavy. He wasn't a favorite, but I think it was pretty damn close.
It was even. I got Pereira at like
Yeah,
minus 140.
yeah, and I think we both said that Hill I thought he was going to be like plus like 500 or something that fight. I am a
Hmm.
fan of Hill, but I think everyone, I like the point that you said. I haven't heard that before where everyone kind of thinks like, oh, Pereira, this could be the fight where Pereira loses. And then everyone just kind of knows that Pereira's going to win anyway. It's like, it's kind of weird, like paradox where he's so dominant that people are just waiting on that upset to happen. It's like the Eagles and Mahomes in the Super Bowl. Mahomes is that dominant. People bet on that upset to happen every single time. But then when the Chiefs do lose, they're like, oh, like the Chiefs suck, blah, blah, blah. And then every time the Chiefs win, it's rigged for the Chiefs. They're that good. So Pereira is that dominant. I think you shouldn't overthink it. Ankalaev is that good. And then one last note to wrap it up. Pereira, let's say he wins this fight, fourth defense at light heavyweight, going all the way back to Dricus du Plessis. You have Aspinall, Dricus, and Pereira at the three highest divisions as the champs. John Jones can say whatever he wants. Those are the three champs. Um, we could see all three of these guys fighting each other. Even where you mentioned Yuri, he could easily move down. He doesn't cut weight at all. But out of these four top names of John Jones, Alex Pereira, Tom Aspinall, Dricus du Plessis, which matchup? I think it's possible any of those guys could fight each other. From Alex all the way up to Aspinall or down, if Dricus moves up. Which fight would you want to see the most out of all of those in terms of legacy and GOAT status? For if that's fighting John Jones, if that's fighting Alex.
So this isn't including Bilal versus Tom Aspinall. Is that one out of
Bilal,
the
I did not
picture?
include in this. Yeah,
Okay,
no,
okay. And I'm also assuming we're not going to see DDP go to heavyweight.
no. That was more to
Okay.
fight Alex, and then if
Yeah,
Alex would
yeah.
move up or down. But
I think the thing is, I think if Alex goes down to 185, I think Dricus beats him at 185. I don't think that's a hot take. I think a lot of people would agree with that. I've seen that before. If it's 205, I think a lot of people
yeah,
would say
I don't think
Pereira.
Alex would cut the weight again. But Dricus is a
Yeah.
very big middleweight.
Yeah, I think a lot of people agree that he would beat him at 185. 205 is very different. So that's why that fight's so interesting because there's a 20-pound difference no matter how we see it, which is why I think depending on where it takes place, the winner drastically changes. I think stylistic wise, if Pereira could get up to heavyweight, if he could fight Tom Aspinall, that would probably be the most insane fun fight to watch because someone's getting finished. I would just make that fight 3 rounds just to have it, or just make it one round, 25 minutes.
You
Just
won't
throw
need
it
him anyway.
all the way back to the UFC's origins. Just make it one 25-minute round. Just let someone get finished, or just have no time limit. Just say it's like a first blood match. The first person to get knocked out loses, or maybe a 2 out of 3 falls match. 2 out of 3, someone has to get knocked out twice for it to actually count. That would be a fun fight to watch. But if we're talking about legacy, it's Pereira versus Jones, two all-time greats. I think that one, the most fun to watch, would definitely be Pereira versus Aspinall, in my opinion. GDP versus Pereira would be cool, but like I said, I think it drastically changes depending on the weight. The only way I think it would be very even, to put it on an even playing field, would be 195 if we get like this special catch weight. But if it goes to 185, Pereira cutting down, I would be very hesitant with that. Dricus would be so much bigger. And if Dricus goes up to 225, we know how big Pereira is naturally at that weight. So I think Dricus would kind of just get bodied too much and he would just be the smaller man. So that's my answer for that.
And my answer is a 5-man Royal Rumble, actually, of Tom
Mm,
Aspinall, Pereira, John Jones, and Dricus. And then the last man in, I said 5-man, CM Punk comes in
uh-huh.
for his UFC return. Bilal Muhammad, we don't need him, but
Bilal
I think
versus CM Punk.
that could be a close matchup for sure. Bilal is so boring. I like his fighting, but he's so boring himself. But these guys at the top of the UFC divisions are all so good right now. I feel like the reason I brought it up is I feel like we are so close, less than a year away from one of these guys switching divisions. Dricus could move up, he's massive. Pereira could move up. He could he could move down. The Aspinall versus Jones fight could happen, but that is why I brought it up. I feel like we're one fight away from each of these guys. Aspinall fights one of these, whoever heavyweight. I hope it's Jones, but Jones fights literally anybody. Hopefully Aspinall. Pereira beats Ankalaev. He swept the division basically. Dricus has besides Kamaev, maybe Barajo, 2 fights away. Either way, I think we're 12 months out from a super fight of one of these champs moving up to fight another one of them. So super exciting stuff on the horizon. And if you have nothing else, I think we'll wrap it up here.
Yeah, one quick thing too. I think realistically, if we're going to see a champion versus champion fight outside of the women's one that we talked about before, it does seem like we are getting that Islam versus Taporia fight. Pretty much every sign has been pointing towards that this summer, or maybe it really depends on when they want to do it. It seems like it's going to be International Fight Week towards the end of the summer. So if we do get a champion versus champion fight, I think we could all agree that out of everyone in the UFC that are champions right now, that's the one that we've really been clamoring for. So that'll be a very good fight to watch as well.
Yeah, so super exciting stuff. Hopefully in the summer or a little bit later, we see a massive mega fight. Taporia moving up. Islam could even move up after.
Hmm.
Um, a lot of fun stuff. But anyway, check out Banning at Next Man Up MMA. And we'll see you guys next time after 312 on to 313 and then beyond. So see you next time.
Peace.